Yeah, so exactly this synthesis that I want to share is about bringing together this real social capital that we've built with our urban presence in New York City, 14 years teaching permaculture design certification courses. And I mean, we've been pretty ambitious about it. We've taught 2 and 3 a year for 14 years on
That's
a week.
incredible.
Yeah, on a weekend format,
Yep.
purposeful, with individual designs. And the reason for all of those three modulations for our permaculture aficionados are worth mentioning. Um, Weekend format PDCs bring in a much richer diversity of people because of the fact that you can take it and not have to take 12 days off from whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah,
And that
totally.
immediately demographically selects for a greater latitude of student in terms of what can they be doing in their daily life and still take a permaculture course. And that's one of our goals. Our goals is to strategically attract people who are potentially professionals, potentially shifting careers, and are thinking about how do I really make my career a deep green career kind of thing. And
Yep.
they're going to hear a video, they're going to see me give a public talk where I talk about the new economy and how to redesign New York City and how to create new entrepreneurial offerings that are so badly needed by a society that right now is asking for better alternatives on, like in so many different areas, that the work is really to train people up to provide those solutions.
Yeah.
It's not that demand doesn't exist, it's that supply doesn't exist in
That's good.
large part. And it's really
That's
important
yeah.
to get people. So we really use this course as a vehicle to get people fired up about some interesting directions to take either their career, say in education or in green product design or in sustainable fashion, because or film or restaurateurs and chefs, or people who want to start medicinal herbs or midwifery and doulas. We have a real range of people taking the course with us. And we like to really follow in the footsteps of a lot of Mollison's directives around thinking about responsibility and also thinking about inheritance and what are we leaving to our children and how ethics need to really drive the design.
Yeah.
And design is a big emphasis. So this is Lisa DePiano, our colleague in the Permaculture Living Lands Trust. It's David Harper, Lisa, and myself. And this is our main hub of education in Brooklyn, owned by a graduate of the program called the Brooklyn Commons on 388 Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, in the 5th borough there. And Lisa's teaching and focusing really on business ideas and on a strength of Lisa's, as I mentioned, is worker co-ops and training people in applying permaculture design in the workplace. And design, I mentioned the adaptation, individual design presentations. The reason for this is also intentional. What it does is it gives the students the ability to take what they're learning in a permaculture course and apply it to any concept, any property. This is a student who decided to do her design for the school where she's teaching, where she wants to integrate what she's learning into her program. And I said, that's a great idea for you to do the school campus for your design, since this is where it is you're going to be teaching. And she took the course specifically because, as I said, we put material out there to attract students like Jackie, who came through and just loved it and really loved that for her design project she could focus on the school. So this training, we are so geared up with the Permaculture Living Lands Trust to be able to launch something that, as a nascent entrepreneur endeavor over the last 15 years, doing it solo and with my sweetheart and with my family, we have manifested quite a bit of it. But what we can do now with Lisa and David is some really exciting, really amplifying this training work that we've been focusing on. And it really follows in the footsteps of what Bill's talking about here. And it's about the hands-on experiences, the campuses, the location. The focus we've had on New York City is unique and is part of what's so awesome about the range of people who've studied with us is the capacity we've built, the ability to create houses, the ability to put in energy systems, the ability to create farmscapes for clients and plant out agroforestry. And what we're looking at now is really how do we take this to a region-wide scale design has been a focus of mine as an educator, as a designer for more than a decade. I'm right now working on finishing up a book called Earth is Our Home that will be bringing this idea of regional scale permaculture design into more clarification.
That's exciting.
I think it's an important place to take the discipline because there's so much opportunity for us to collaborate at another level if we can find ways to at least get a couple mock-ups out there of what does it look like to apply permaculture design for regional master planning for energy and food security.
Yeah.
And I think this is part of it, taking what I'm calling pioneering ecological farming methods. Again, it's really a lot of unique words to say something that's pretty straightforward, which is we can combine responsible ways of grazing animals with valuable, potentially edible nut trees in riparian zones. And we can do all these things at the same time, and it becomes really important when we see it happen as a publicly funded project without the need for it to be something that only happens through, say, entrepreneurial nurseries or for-profit sectors. And that's important direction that we're taking this is, as I said, taking the exciting language of organizations like the DEC, planting productive forests. I think forest is more fun than buffer. Buffers, buffer is a good word too, because it clearly explicitly describes. Buffer is an interesting word, really, now that I think about it, because it really highlights this perspective that the function of the ecosystem is to mitigate a contamination vector of some sort. Because that's explicitly what buffering. What are we buffering?
Yeah.
Well, we're buffering, as you said, like glyphosate or some sort of like chemical runoff that would have been, or petroleum leachate from a parking lot. But it is good that where we have reforestation, that can be something that both increases eco-complexity and produces something edible that could be edible for centuries. See, the focus that we're taking on the nut trees is because it also took me a little bit to realize that I've always been interested, as you read in my bio, in orchards, and is part of where we incorporate biodynamics into permaculture, because in particular, when you look at the technique aspect of BD, is the shorthand for biodynamics, BD is particularly strong when it comes to ecological, more like herbal remedies for orchards. Right. But it took me a while to realize that nut trees were really the jam if you want to have a landscape that is there for centuries.
Yeah.
And continues to give a harvest, right? And here on the East Coast, this deciduous forest biome, these epitomize what Peter and my teachers who inspired me, Peter had this great phrase where he would say, what we're doing in permaculture design is we're hopping on the magic carpet ride of natural succession. And I was like, wow, that is such a great way to put it. And I'm still learning what that looks like, right? Yeah. What does it look like to hop on that magic carpet ride? And to me, this is where my evolution is now. It's about how do we get more of these incredibly, here we're looking at a tree at Buzz Fervers at Perfect Circle Farm, where Buzz has been a troubadour of nut collecting, plant stock, finding a lot of these forgotten about historic properties that have really potentially, part of what he's doing is planting it out and just doing
Yep.
extensive plantings to see like who's who, what's what, select out who's worth keeping, and then propagating that and grafting that and exploring multi-grafts, right? So we're looking at this lineage and we're saying, all this is great. It's cool. You can run a business doing this. But what does it look like to get it out of the for-profit market-driven sector where it's all about selling plant stock to who knows who's going to do who knows what with it? You have no idea where these plants end up. And you have no idea. Somebody buys all your stock. And you're like, oh, it's great. They did a 600-acre agroforestry planting and they bought out all my stock. Oh, great. You just had that planted on a slow money investment project that is about real estate investment and has no easements and is going to turn into a housing development in 25 years. So it's like, so we see that weakness, and that's one of the things we want to build a strength to address that weakness with. It's one of the weaknesses we see in the Northern Nut Growers Association with a lot of the nut tree advocates, a lot of the agroforestry advocates, is this lack of thinking about what's the long-term status of the land where you're doing all this planting. Here we're looking at a heart nut tree that's a graft. This is at the John Hershey. This is at the homestead property in Guthriesville. So, just articulating this same point that it's propagating these rare and valuable nuts is part of a food security plan. Planting them out, redesigning properties. So here, I feel like this is a good snapshot that I like to share to give folks a sense of what does it look like to take a lot of the different methods that I've worked with as a permaculture practitioner and apply them to a property and to a client set of goals, right? So this is about, what we're looking at is about 50 some acres of land. There's a lot of slope on it. The only level area and kind of high spot is where you see the patches that say vegetable production. And then the land all slopes away from that. And you can see how we're just giving a quick snapshot in what does it look like to think about hosting infrastructure. You can see if you sort of squint that we've got things like tent platforms and cabins and bathhouses and summer kitchens all drawn into the design and thought about, because a piece we've noticed that gets missed often in the food movement, local food movement, is hosting of labor. Where are people going to stay and what kind of accommodations do you give them? And setting up really well thought out, integrated, passive, natural building accommodations for people who work as interns is an important piece of the design. So we think a lot about that. Water systems, energy systems. Here's one where we're just looking at the agroecology systems. And this is a project where I wanted to show how do we go from the site to a concept design to then beginning to implement it. And here we're actually looking at a project where the client had it within their budget for me to do all of this land prep with their tractors. And again, here you see some of the numbers of what I'm saying about this number. Who's this come from? This place called the Glenwood Institute, that's a think tank funded by the Rockefeller Foundation in the Hudson Valley. Glenwood estimates that there is over 600 million in unmet demand for local organic produce in the Hudson Valley.
Wow.
So what they mean by unmet is clearly people are spending 600 million right now, but they can't find anywhere to buy it on local produce.
Right.
Install the gardens, feed people more locally. And showing techniques that can be applied in urban environments, teaching a diversity of ages. Really think about rainwater a lot, and using larger scale rainwater systems is a unique component of the farm designs that we're engaged in. Here's one where we even used swale layouts on contour beds. These beds were shot with surveying equipment. And right tool for the right job. Training people.
Yep.
Organic farming gives more farms that we can learn from or studying, and really sitting at the feet of operations that are doing some really unique work, and ultimately creating a diversity of green jobs.